Brianna Patterson with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Executive Director, Samuel Gunter.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you are doing well. And let's get started with the news. So a couple of things top of mind for folks is that we are very much looking forward to seeing those of you who are registered for the North Carolina Housing Day at the General Assembly next week. As a reminder for those of you who are registered, the reception is going to be on the 28th, and our day at the General Assembly is the 29th. We have long since sold out for the reception. The response has been incredible, and we are looking forward to seeing so many more of you than last year at the General Assembly to talk to our elected officials as they kick off this short legislative session about housing and about the need for housing investments in North Carolina and some of the challenges that those of us that are trying to do this work on the ground face. So looking forward to seeing all of you using your voices to advocate at the General Assembly next week. A couple of other organizational reminders: Bringing It Home 2026, the in-person and the virtual agendas for the conference are now available. You can see them linked in the call notes on our website. As a reminder, homelessness service professionals and allies are going to gather on May 26th through the 28th at the McKimmon Center to learn, to network, to collaborate with industry experts from across North Carolina and beyond. So again, you can check out the conference page on our website. Registration closes on May 15th. You can contact Stephanie Kirby on our staff if you have any questions. But looking forward to seeing many of you there as well. On the federal side, at the moment, there are no significant updates or movement to report on the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. There's not much to talk about at the moment on the federal side. So we're going to jump right to the state side, given that our General Assembly is in session. But before we move to the General Assembly, we're going to start with the Attorney General. And you can see a link to an article in the call notes about Attorney General Jeff Jackson pushing for changes to make rental housing more affordable. He and a bipartisan group of attorneys general are urging the Federal Trade Commission to ban hidden and surprise fees. You can read their letter linked in our call notes. Something to keep an eye out. On the legislative front, they are back in session, and our policy director, Stephanie Watkins Cruz, is down in the building this morning, prepping for Housing Day next week, and just in general, talking with our elected officials about finally passing a state budget and ensuring that there are sufficient disaster recovery and affordable housing funds in that budget. That's going to be an important part of our work next week while we are walking around the halls together and doing legislative visits. On the property tax side, updating on the committee, on Wednesday, April 15th, the House Select Committee on Property Tax Reduction met and voted to make two legislative recommendations to the General Assembly. So the first proposal considers putting to a vote a constitutional amendment that would authorize the General Assembly to enact property tax levy limits for local governments. This is a concern about a concern specifically around local government's ability to raise revenue, especially given cuts at the state and the federal level. We will talk more about that in a future housing call. But that was the first proposal that came out of the committee. The second proposal would modify the nonprofit low to moderate income housing property tax exemption. We've talked about that quite a bit on this call, but those proposals are explained in more detail in a recent blog post that is linked in the call notes. Two other proposals that were brought forth at the March meeting relating to hospitals were not brought for a vote. Committee co-chair Julia Howard also announced that the committee, which was formed by Speaker Hall as an ad hoc committee, has been extended through at least December 2026, with further extensions likely. We've got a summary also linked to the call notes of the committee's work since it began in December of 2025. Next week, we're going to be joined on this call by Hudson Vaughn, who is the coalition's director for the Community Justice Collaborative to discuss how North Carolinians most cost burdened by property taxes will benefit from the improvements to existing property tax relief programs, homestead exemption, circuit breaker, and so on, that North Carolinians already support then from a levy limit. So we're going to push a little bit more deeply into the potential impacts of a levy limit and other ways that that property tax relief exists for lower income homeowners. On the disaster recovery side, yesterday, the Governor's Advisory Committee on Western North Carolina Recovery convened for a virtual meeting. The governor indicated that the General Assembly is on the same page as him about needing to pass another round of recovery funding. The most recent round of funding was passed 10 months ago. Governor Stein's recent Helene recovery budget request to the NCGA requests an additional $792 million that includes $10 million for rent and utility assistance across Western North Carolina. Many of you have probably seen in the news an update on the single-family housing program related to Hurricane Helene. Stephanie McGarrah from the Division of Community Revitalization presented an update on the Renew NC single-family housing program that 35 homes have been completed to date and 3,400 applications remain active. There's a link to the dashboard in our call notes. They've grouped applications into 4 processing phases based on income, on repair status, on the county's most impacted and distressed designation, and on household needs. I think the big picture in where we're at on, particularly on the single family side, but with recovery in general, is ultimately we're operating with insufficient funds to meet the need, to serve every eligible applicant. And that they're going to have a better idea of what that number will be by the end of the calendar year. But the current estimates from their office indicate approximately just over $1 billion would be needed to fund all the applications. But the construction budget for the single family rehab program falls short at $722 million. Of course, we've known this back when we got the CDBG disaster recovery designation from the federal government, that all of our estimates then under Governor Cooper, the work that their office did to estimate the housing impacts from Hurricane Helene, we knew we were well short of the resources needed to serve all of the folks that needed it. So she also indicated, Stephanie McGarrah also indicated that DCR is working with the NCGA to stand up a temporary relocation assistance program that will help cover housing expenses for households with demonstrated financial need while their homes are under construction. And Emily Ganji with the Governor's Recovery Office also reported that more than 800 homes have been repaired by nonprofit organizations with state funds. And so they're doing this comparison between the 800 homes completed in that universe versus the 35 completed by the state. The state officials are attributing that slower pace both to a lack of affordable temporary relocation housing, as well as more rigid federal requirements for procurement and environmental reviews. I think it's also worth noting that the repair work or the rehab work that the state is taking on are really the most extreme cases, right? So there's not quite apples to apples comparison between those two numbers. But this gives you a sense of kind of where we're at. I think in line with that, you may have seen an article pop up about Asheville in particular. There's reporting that Asheville had designated, so as many of you know who use CDBG, both in the disaster recovery field, but also just CDBG more broadly, there's a state allocation and then there are entitlement districts as well. And the entitlement districts get their own allocation. The same is true here. The state got a bucket of funds and the city of Asheville got a bucket of funds. And in trying to not replicate the work of the single family rehab, so we don't have two separate processes for folks in Asheville and around the rest of Western North Carolina, the city of Asheville and the state reached an agreement that the state would handle all the application processing and so on for the region. Where the confusion came was, I think a number of members of council in Asheville were under the impression that the state would also take bear the cost of of the repair. And that was not the agreement. And as such, Asheville only designated $3 million for recovery, which is nowhere near sufficient to meet the eligible need in the city of Asheville. And so there's a question right now about how to proceed, because the state was clear that the bucket of funds that they would run the administrative side, but that the repair funds, the bucket of funds, was for the rest of Western North Carolina, but that the city of Asheville had to cover the costs from the repairs through their allocation. So they're trying to figure out a path forward. But again, it's notable that we've been through this with Matthew, we've been through this with Florence, now we're going through it with Helene, that trying to navigate recovery it's an incredibly complex process that requires an overwhelming amount of attention and care and continued coordination. All again with the backdrop that the amount of resources that we have are insufficient to the task. Some other local headlines beyond disaster recovery that are worth checking out around the state. Something from NC Newsline, NC Communities Affordable Apartment Complex gets tenants after a long delay. The Indy has done a report on advocates calling to invest more in affordable housing, and another on why Raleigh city leaders won't commit to a $200 million affordable housing bond. So there's some other headlines from the week from around the state. There's a report that is worth your time from the National Association of Realtors. It's entitled "Baby Boomers Remain Largest Share of Home Buyers as First-Time Buying Falls to Record Low." This is a trend we have been seeing now, that the average age of a home buyer is going up and up. It's the highest it's ever been. And the average age of a first-time home buyer is also the highest it's ever been, which is a very concerning statistics for those of you who are trying to buy a home, those of you who have children trying to buy a home, and grandchildren trying to buy a home. I don't know how old y'all are. All right, other events that are worth putting on your calendar. There's a webinar coming up on April 23rd. The FDIC hosts Supporting Disaster Recovery in North Carolina. Again, all of these you can find on in our call notes. There's another webinar on May 5th where the Bipartisan Policy Center hosts Housing Innovators, Building the Future of Affordable Housing. The UNC School of Government, again, is doing their affordable housing seminar, tools, strategies, and case studies for local government leadership on May 7th in Marion. Again, this is open to professionals and elected officials. Registration closes a week before the program, and the cost of the course is $270. Hendersonville is having a housing summit Wednesday, May 27th at Hendersonville High School. It's going to feature the unveiling of the city's community-driven strategic housing plan, an overview of some new initiatives, and an opportunity to provide input to strengthen collaboration. The summit is free. And then again, the CAHEC Partners Conference coming up June 9th and 10th at the Raleigh Convention Center. Registration ends May 22nd. All of that is linked in our call notes. Again, as a reminder, sort of the big stuff from the day is next week. Looking forward to seeing everyone at the General Assembly for the Housing Day, co-hosted by the North Carolina Housing Coalition, the Coalition to End Homelessness, Habitat for Humanity of North Carolina, and the North Carolina Community Land Trust Coalition. The other big updates are around disaster recovery and around the property tax updates from the committee and the recommendations they made to the General Assembly. And we'll go more deeply into that next week with Hudson, talking about existing property tax relief programs and the potential impact of levy limits on local government's ability to raise revenue for critical public services. With that, I'm going to let you go about your day. I hope you all are well. Thank you again for all of the work that you do, and look forward to seeing many of you next week at the General Assembly and many more of you in May at the McKimmon Center for Bringing It Home. Have a wonderful day. See you next time.